Welcome to episode number 14 of the Castbar. The race for world first inside Blackrock Foundry has begun, and carrying their gear from Highmall makes this race contain several worthwhile combatants. We reveal to you the world you might have never known about as we take a closer look at role-playing. And this time we asked you a question before closing with a review of Sunken Temple. Thank you, and enjoy. To the Castbar. It is for me Sunday, February 15th. It is for Evan Monday, February 16th, as it is incredibly late. It is 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and with me I have Evan and Florian. How you guys doing?
I'm doing all right.
Doing pretty rad.
So, anything new this week?
No, not very much. We recruited a new tank for our guild, so getting him initiated and geared up a little bit into the whole way of things has been pretty good. We had a pretty successful Friday. Not as great as the Friday before, but still nothing to shake a fist at.
Right on. And Florian, you are ingrained in Diablo with the new season?
Yeah, the new season hit, and that's been taking up the vast majority of my gaming time since then.
As it has mine. For those of you that don't know, Diablo has seasons, and the new season just started on Friday. And Diablo is awesome, so you should go play that game too. just devote your entire life to video games. Trust me, it's worth it in some regards. But yeah, awesome. Good week. Do anything for Valentine's Day?
Oh, well, I had to work that night, but went out for a special dinner before that had to happen. So, just like the usual stuff, no intense stories.
Right on. Florian?
Absolutely nothing, but unlike you, I'm unattached, so for me it's not a problem.
That's fair. I was super excited because I managed to, we went to a restaurant at 6 p.m. and I was like, oh, well, good thing, and it's in a mall. So I was like, good thing they have those little buzzers so we can just grab the buzzer and go walk around the mall. It was only a 5-minute wait. I was amazed. But, I don't know. I won't complain about it. Food was good. Let's get into the news. Welcome everybody to the news. The biggest thing in news is probably that this Tuesday, last Tuesday, whichever, Blackrock Foundry Mythic difficulty opened, and that's the top tier of the elite. And so the world first race has begun for who can take Blackhand's head first on the highest difficulty. Now this race is a little bit different from the one that we had in Highmall, because Highmall was the beginning of an expansion, so we didn't have a prior raid's gear to work with. So this one, however, a lot of the guilds have been working with, running through Mythic Highmall and are already very highly geared for what they're walking into. Have you guys followed anything along so far?
No, I've been keeping an eye on the progress. I know nobody's finished it yet, but I'm not following the teams. I'm not following any streams. I don't think they would be streaming at this point, though. What do you think?
Well, Method, surprisingly, if it's an earlier boss, after a certain number, I don't know if it's a certain number of teams or something, after a certain number of, or however they do it, but if it's an earlier boss and it's something that everyone's defeating very easily, they'll just immediately release their videos for it. Now, currently we have Method and Paragon, who are the only ones that are 9 out of 10. And Blast Furnace is one of the largest offenders besides Blackhand himself. Blast Furnace is a very large obstacle for a lot of the guilds to get through. The question, so Blast Furnace is not a video that Method would release, because clearly it's still an obstacle for so many people that they wanted to stay that way. I mean, especially because right now we have 15 teams that have 8 out of 10, only needing Blast Furnace, Blast Furnace, and Blackhand.
Yeah, I can imagine Blast Furnace being a huge obstacle. I mean, that's one of the ones I have not even touched yet in normal mode, just because it's so kind of I don't know. It's just the community's abuzz with this opinion that it's really kind of hard. And I know a lot of people have been successful with that, but I have not taken my team in there yet, and I haven't joined a pug to do Blast Furnace yet, just because it seems like there's plenty of other content to kind of stick my teeth into. I'm not banging my head against the wall yet, and I don't want to start banging my head against the wall trying to wrestle with that. It's just a matter of investment versus reward at this point, but soon.
Myself currently, yesterday I got to kill Heroic Kargath for the first time. That was awesome, and I got a neck piece. And then today I jumped into a pug for Blackrock Foundry, and the only one we got down was, I don't know their full name, but it's Hans and Franz.
Right.
That's a really fun fight. I enjoyed that a lot. I think people don't realize that they don't need to run around as much as they do.
Yeah, and with a few tuning changes coming on the horizon to the suplexing throw, I think that it'll be a lot more manageable and more enjoyable. Right now, it's just kind of a mysterious. It's hard to know exactly what's going on, especially when your tanks start getting kind of one shot out of nowhere. It seems like it's a little bit strange, but maybe a bigger or better indication, like a more visual indication when you have a suplexing throw coming in, so you can prepare a little bit, get everybody on board, especially in pugs, with the external cooldowns to help them out, that kind of thing.
You want to know what was really awesome? It took us like 3 or 4 tries total to down him, and on like the second try, maybe it was the third one, we had one tank go down, and they were at like, I don't know, 20%, and we were like, just keep going! And, then they cast a crushing suplex or whatever, the suplex throw, and it grabbed the tank we had. We're like, who's he gonna throw it at? There was this poor rogue that took a panda to the face and just completely got smooshed into the ground. Just, it was like, well, I guess it just chooses somebody.
That's unfortunate. We had a tank go down at the very last part of our Hand and Front's fight. The first time we downed him, he had like 15% left, and our other tank managed to take him down for the rest of the way with our guild. But I don't think that he actually threw him at anybody else. I think we might have missed that, but that would have been funny to see.
Well, and like after that we went to Flamebender, but I don't know what was going on because she was just not dying. Like 7 minutes into the fight, and and we died, and we were only she just had 47%. And I was like, "Jeez, is anyone actually hitting her?"
I think remember we talked about after Heimdall was released, the very first Imperator Margart kills took over an hour, and I was told that some of the high premier rating guilds working on Mythic now took. Let me see. This might be heroic, it might be mythic, but it was something like the same thing. Like a kill took 190 minutes on Flamebender, just because there's no hardened rage mechanic. It's just a series of phases that repeat over and over and over again. And I feel like people are just like sustaining through the entire thing. Yeah, I don't know if there's reportedly, the first kill on this guy was 190 minutes long.
That's disgusting.
At which point you have 2 people in real time rotating, taking little breaks, closing their eyes, take a quick shower, somebody else takes over their healer, they come back 20 minutes later, swap out again, somebody goes to get a snack.
3 hours, no.
Which, I mean, let's all be honest with each other. Have you ever sat down and played Warcraft for 3 hours straight?
Not without getting up.
Really?
I don't think so. Of course, I have a 5-year-old, so I have to get up a lot.
Yeah, that does make sense.
I mean, but probably, yeah, probably. There's probably definitely times where I've done it, but it's not something I would notice. Anyway, moving along. Next, we have visual improvements coming to Warcraft. Are these coming in the patch specifically, or are they just a thing that they were previewing? I didn't actually see the details of when we were getting these. Anyway, so there's going to be a large number of visual improvements that are coming to Warcraft. They're not like retextures or anything like that. There are other things that'll really spice up the game. So, you'll see, if you've ever looked at like people that are like, check out my HBAO lighting in Skyrim, and you have no idea what that means, but the picture looks really good. They're implementing that type of lighting into Warcraft. It's where like lighting has its own like area of effect of like what it lights up, and they're improving the shadows and improving anti-aliasing so things look smoother, and it gives it a lot more depth and character, improves on the 3D effects. What did you guys think about this when you took a look at them?
I think it's a really good improvement because lighting is a big part of immersion graphically, especially when you're in a dark area or at nighttime. And you can really notice significant improvements, like in the before and after pictures. I know there was one on Blizzard's website that was a picture of a campfire, and it looked so much better in the after version with better illumination of the things around it. And it also seems in general that if they have better lighting, they can probably do more things with dark areas, because right now in WoW, we don't have a lot of really dark dungeons. We don't have a lot of really dark caves. Everything is kind of well lit. Really, yeah. And with better lighting, I think there might be more possibility to do something like that, where you can have more dark areas, but since you have more advanced lighting, you can put enough lighting in there that we can still see what we're doing, but still have like a dark and foreboding atmosphere. Because in order to be able to do that, you need a certain level of lighting. And I think WoW's getting there now.
Yeah, I had gone through Shadow Moon Valley on my Alliance alt, and I thought some of the wooded areas were way too dark. It was like I couldn't play through them during the day because of the glare on my computer screen.
I have not had this problem. Yeah,
you got 30 days a night going on up there in Alaska.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. It's dark all the time. It is improving though. Luckily, every day we gain like 7 minutes of sunlight, and then once around like April hits, then the sun just never goes away, and it's like the best thing ever. But do you remember which part specifically you were speaking of? Because I don't remember anything that I was like even having a slight difficult amount of being able to see. That was not proper English at all, but
I'm thinking that up in the north, walking around, it might be in that little Zanger Marshy area, especially. And then the Gloom Shade Grove, especially.
Huh.
Excuse me. Which, I mean, Gloom Shade kind of lends itself to that kind of image.
Yeah, that might be like something like monitor settings or something like that.
Yeah, it might be. I'm not running with the most up-to-date monitor technology, which brings me to my point about these graphical changes in general, is that I'm not sure if these are the kinds of changes that people will see if they're running on a low-end system. Are these graphical changes for the future? I mean, the people who are going to notice them the most are going to be people with the best equipment?
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Probably, because a lot of this lighting is going to be resource-intensive, and the people who are running on lower graphical settings are going to continue to use the same lighting systems that they're using now, so they won't notice anything. It's only going to be the people who have more powerful systems that can run things on higher ultra, or run WoW on higher ultra, rather.
Well, I can, for an example, Evan, I like, especially with like the HB whatever it is lighting, I have a friend who is way too into Skyrim, and that's why I use the example, because he sat there and rambled on to me about this special type of lighting, and it does look very good. Like, it does look good. But his computer could run WoW on Ultra while it was asleep. Like, his computer, he spent way too much money on his computer. Anyway, and he could run Skyrim at, what is that? Not a standard rate. A baseline of like 60 frames per second without any problems. He could push it higher if he wanted, but there was no reason to. Once he installed this program that made all Skyrim run HBAO lighting, it dropped his frames per second from 60 down to like 20. And even if he opened his computer up completely and overclocked all of his system, it would still only get him up to 30 because of how resource intensive the lighting was. Like, just the lighting. So, now if WoW implement, like, obviously that was a third party thing. WoW might do it a little bit differently where it's generated on a more efficient basis so that it isn't so destructive to your computer's ability to function.
Right.
But there's not really any way to tell until we can play with it. Is it on the PTR?
I'm not sure about that. I think so, because I've seen screenshots on Reddit about it. I do believe that is where it is at the moment. I do believe all these graphical changes are associated with patch 6.1.
Which, patch 6.1 should be live very soon, considering the last patch that went into the PTR is a release build.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. It's marked for release, at least, so that normally means it's coming soon. We should have it in probably within the next month. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
And the final thing for the news is that if you remember a little while back, we had an RG giveaway contest. And part of that contest was that RG, any purchases for like the month of December and a little bit into January, all of the money of those purchases went 100% to the Red Cross to benefit charity. This one was for Ebola victims, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and they managed to raise $1.9 million. That's better. No, that's pretty good. Like, I didn't realize that Blizzard has been doing this every year, because, like, the Cinder Kitten, when that one came out, it raised $2.3 million, Brewpup raised $2 million, RG raised $1.9 million. Apparently, WoW players are getting a little more stickler about their money, because they don't want to buy battle pets. Or maybe RG's not as cute as a dog that serves you booze and a flaming kitty.
So you're saying that they've ended the campaign and this is their final figure, or are they still selling him?
No, this is their final. Well, they're still selling him, but the proceeds no longer go to the Red Cross. So this is the final figure.
That's strange, because I think, personally, this is the cutest pet they've released, you know? And if the prices are the same, then I don't know what might account for that discrepancy. There is the possibility that the specific charity affected people's opinions.
Maybe. I mean, I know a lot of people kind of roll their eyes at the whole Ebola thought anyway. Criticizing how large or small of a threat it was. Mm-hmm. The other thing about it is that I know that, at least from the reports of the public, WoW players don't tend to have a whole lot of money. But we did just all buy an expansion, like, the month before. So I could possibly see that being a factor in why they didn't spend another $10 to Blizzard for the little pet.
Right, I wonder. Yeah, it'd be cool if we could look at their kind of mount sales too, and maybe plot it over time and try to draw a better conclusion from that kind of thing, because that might give us a better idea of what's happening.
I don't want to look at Blizzard's QuickBooks. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, that's true.
But that would be my guess why it sold less than previous year's pets, is just that we just bought an expansion.
Okay, so my first thought is that I didn't realize that those other two pets were associated with a campaign for fundraising either, as a matter of fact. I knew, of course, RG was, that did appear on the background downloader, or the Blizzard desktop app, rather. I don't recall the Brew Pup being associated with a charity, nor the Cinder Kitty, though I guess Cinder Kitty was out around the same time as Firelands and Cataclysm. Is that right?
That sounds about right, yes.
And I wasn't playing during those times. So, I'm wondering, yeah, it looks like we're going to still see this kind of trend going in through the future, which I think is pretty cool. It gives a kind of lets Blizzard flex their philanthropy muscle a little bit. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and this is a legitimate fundraising campaign, and that everything is actually contributing to those charities that they're saying it will. I think they're really good pets. I think the pets are, especially the interactive one with the Brew Pup, updating the pets and everything.
Booze.
Exactly.
Giving you the ability to get completely sloshed.
I like you have the option to see these pets around, and I like how they can be kind of boxed up and sent in game, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's my whole opinion on that whole thing.
All right. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Florian?
Not really. It just kind of is what it is. Good job on Blizzard.
Yeah, I mean, this just there's a whole bunch of people giving criticism to this because it's like a publicity stunt by Blizzard, and they can just write off the $1.9 million on their taxes, which seems silly because in all honesty, it's not like they're selling an actual product. I mean, RG may be cute, but I don't think he exactly broke the budget to program.
Yeah, probably not. No, but I think it's good artwork and everything. I'm not entirely sure if it's as involved as making a mount or something that has to fit all the different.
One question I do have is that these are some of the only numbers that we actually have for how much a pet or anything sells for. We don't know how many heart of the aspects, the big golden dragon thing. We don't know how many of those are sold, or the grinning reaver or the nightmare horse that with the post that everyone can use. We don't know how many of those have sold. These are the only numbers we get. I want to know if these numbers are like accurate averages for how many have sold of each of them, or if these are inflated because of the charity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Yeah, when you have the other more inert pets like little KT and little XT and little Ragnaros or whatever, whether or not people go out of their way to buy pets and they might otherwise not because they want to make a contribution to a charity like that. Is that what you're saying?
Right. And, does this... Because what? They're $10 each, so that means that 190,000 people bought RG. So we'll, go rough on and say each of these about 200,000 people have bought, which really, in the comparison of 10 million Warcraft players, isn't that many. But I want to know if, an equal number have also bought, like when whatever other pet came out, the little mini Pandaren monk, if 200,000 of those sold and made Blizzard $2 million.
Yeah, I think it's really going to boil down to personal preference. I think there is a subset of the entire WoW player base that is going to be more predisposed to buying things like that just because they've made a decision that this is a hobby they'll spend money on and they don't mind paying the real money for the in-game items above and beyond their actual subscription. After that, I think that sub base of players is going to be probably twice as big, I'm going to say, as the number of players that actually bought this pet, because I think after a while it's going to boil down to personal preference. Like, do I want this dumb goat or do I want a sweet small robot, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Obviously, there are people who own every item that's available in the Blizzard store. Maybe there's some people that are right on the cusp of whether or not they would spend the $10 and just bought something that would have been their favorite.
Well, and then there's other cute things that you might have gotten for free, like the Molten Corgi.
Right, exactly.
Because it's adorable. Let's go into a closer look. Welcome to A Closer Look, everybody. A Closer Look is a section we do every week, and we just take a closer look at something in Warcraft, whether it's a feature, an idea, a concept. It doesn't even have to be newsworthy. It's just something that we'd like to give it a little bit more discussion that might be interesting for you as the listener to actually, maybe it's something that you want to know a little bit more about, or that, maybe you didn't know about, like this week. This is something that either some people are really into, and some people are just like, no, get that away from my game. And and that's role-playing. There's actually a fairly large role-playing community that exists within the World of Warcraft, and what this is that instead of, running around being like, oh man, my mother's telling me to get off the computer, and I really got to do the dishes, and yo, who wants to get together to kill Blackhand tonight? It's you actually are your character. So you type things out, speak properly, and have you ever played D&D? When you go into the shop and you talk to a shopkeeper, you don't say, yo dog, I just spilled my milk on my lap, hang on a sec. You actually, treat him properly like you would if you were actually there. And this is the concept behind role-playing. I mean, because really, your character is, one, incredibly unique, incredibly powerful, and I'm going to go with unique and powerful. Those are two really good ones just to start off with right there. You aren't Farmer John. However, if you want to be Farmer John that happens to be extremely good with a sword, then, you're probably a warrior. And congratulations. That's something that you can do. I believe all of us in some way have taken part in role-playing in Warcraft. Is this correct?
I can vouch for myself. Yes, it is quite correct.
Yeah, and I've done roleplay too. More so at the beginning of my WoW career. That was one of the appeals of having gotten into the game. Less so, unfortunately, now, just because of really my real life circumstances have changed a little bit, and that was a hobby that kind of took up a lot of time.
It does eat up a lot of time. I mean, sometimes, would you sprint across town just to, go buy a beer? Probably not. You'd probably walk there. So, I mean, the more realistic you want to be with your gameplay, the more time it's actually going to take. Because, you would walk from the bank to the auction house.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's not a jog option.
And also, whereas normal players, sorry, I don't want to make that classification, players who are more concerned with PvE content or PvP content, who are more concerned about upgrading the base statistics of their character through acquiring gear and everything at the top level and leveling up and all that, they're going to be focused on WoW-related goals that basically boil down to get out of the city, get to the quest giver hubs, get to the dungeons, get to the raid finder. Your interactions with other players are going to be, for an hour and a half or a half hour for a 5-man dungeon at a time, and then it's going to end. It's going to be a multi-cross server. But when you're role-playing, it's going to be in the cities. It's going to be where the people kind of congregate, and you're not going to be there to sell your vendor trash and to put something in the bank and leave. You're going to be there to, go to the inn, go to the cathedral district, go to the different taverns, and you're going to be talking to players first and foremost. You're going to be establishing dialogues with other players, building storylines, and that doesn't lend itself really to hop on for 10 minutes and do your garrison chores. It doesn't really lend itself to that kind of quick get in and out play style at all. It's a lot slower.
It's much slower because you're with roleplay, you're seeking a level of enjoyment from something that the game doesn't necessarily readily provide for you. I mean, Blizzard makes raids for you to go and kill bosses, and you get your satisfaction from watching heads roll and then picking up pretty purple things that make your numbers higher. With role-playing, depending on where you're role-playing and what you're doing, your level and your gear almost might not matter whatsoever at all.
Absolutely not, no.
I mean, I know plenty of people who their level 100 rogue, who's raiding heroic high mall at the time, are actually transmogged, which we'll talk about in just a moment, to look like they're about level 27. They got just some cheap leather on and like a mask over their face because, that's a lot more realistic look than some of the gear that we walk out of raids with.
Right, exactly. And your gear in roleplay is not, the numbers on it don't help you. What helps you is your gear's ability to help you tell a story about your character. Right.
And so, the thing we're going to start with is, some very common trends and things you might want to be aware of. The first one that I'm going to point out is that, of course, there's role-playing servers. There's a few of them. And these are the places that are probably going to be the most ideal place for you to look if you want to try and practice role-playing or just get into it or whatever, or you're looking to, find different enjoyment in the game. The thing about this is that even on role-playing servers, be aware, there are a lot of people who are not there to roleplay. They might be, a part-time role player, and it's like, no, I understand, but I got to do this, and get to my raid right now. So just be aware that on a role-playing server, not everyone is in character. Actually, probably only 15, 20% are solid in character?
Probably less than that. I would say closer to maybe 5%. Because there are a lot of people who roll on role-playing servers that just don't roleplay at all. In fact, I first rolled on a role-playing server before I started role-playing in WoW, simply because people on a role-playing server knew how to spell, and I could understand what they were saying in chat. I ended up starting role-playing later on, but there are a lot of people who don't role-play. What I will say is that even if you're on an RP server, it would behoove a prospective role-player to find a role-playing guild so that they can find people that they can roleplay with who they know want to roleplay and are interested in it. It's a lot easier than just finding random people, and that way you can also have a more consistent plot because your character's not meeting different random people every single time you go to roleplay.
Right, and normally a role-playing guild will also know of other role-playing guilds, so it's a way to really introduce yourself into the community a lot more strongly.
Yeah, that's a really good thing, especially these days now that we have cross-realm raiding, cross-realm dungeons, cross-realm everything. The idea of realm community seems to have kind of started to die off. And on roleplay server, that's maintained by the role-playing guilds and role-playing groups that kind of maintain their own community and server identity, which no longer exists on a lot of the other non-role-playing servers.
And there's also a few add-ons that are wonderful for helping identify other role players. Some of the more common ones are like My Roleplay, XRP, and there's a couple others, and there's like variations of each. A lot of them interchange with one another, and what these do is that they interact with one another, so that if you click on that guy that's over there, essentially, which means you're looking at him, it'll actually put a little icon on their little target frame that tells you this person. It's essentially like, I'm flagged for roleplay. Like, I am here to do this.
Right. One of the very first mods that was allowing people to find each other in a roleplay setting back in Classic WoW was called Flag RSP. And I know some add-ons fall out of popularity and fall out of stop being updated, that kind of thing. So, of course, the network changes, but that was a quintessential one back in the day. The features that were included in that and are probably included in the roleplay add-ons that are popular today are that you can modify your name with a surname or a pre-name, if you like. Give yourself a short description that people can view upon inspecting you, and then also it lets you set your RP status, AFK, at my keyboard, but not looking to roleplay, in character, feel free to approach me, that kind of thing, which is actually really invaluable and leads to, I think, roleplaying with a lot more confidence.
That's exactly, like, the add-on I use currently is XRP, and that's exactly how it works. I can set the details for, like, you if you want, you can put your character's backstory in the description, but normally that's not something that would readily be available, and is generally more personal to people, because, this is essentially you. How often do you just tell people everything about your past? If you do, nothing against you. But a lot of people, that's not something that just comes up in regular conversation. So it's more like details, mannerisms, if you're a squinty eye character, something like that. It just to give people an idea of who it is that they're walking up on. And then, like mine, also, I can just click on it, and like it only has 2 settings, and I can turn the bubble to red, which means out of character, and green, which means in character. Simple as that. What are some other things that you guys really think are important for people to know that might be wanting to go into a roleplay scene?
Well, I definitely recommend getting this add-on first. It's going to let you identify people who want to be approached for roleplay, and I think when you're dipping your feet in to the whole thing, like Florian was saying, the minority of people are going to be role players, even on a roleplay server, vast minority. And identifying somebody who will be receptive to roleplay is, I think, a good first step, and this add-on can kind of really help. If you don't want to run add-ons, or if you just want to try it out before investing in downloading an add-on, then I would say try to find out where the congregation spots kind of are, as a general rule, across servers. The Cathedral District in Stormwind, unfortunately Goldshire is really popular.
Do not go there if you are just starting out. Like, I realize that that's a really easy place to get to, but we're going to be honest here. Role-playing also involves role-playing erotic things. And Goldshire and Silvermoon are the 2 places to do that if you are Alliance or Horde.
Right, but I've also heard that Silvermoon is one of the only places that Horde people reliably congregate.
I don't know. I've never roleplayed on Horde, so.
Lawrence?
Silvermoon is actually a really good place for roleplay, and the ERP there is generally confined to the upper rooms at the inn, so you can safely roleplay in Silvermoon with no problems.
Okay.
Yeah, that's been my experience too in Goldshire. It's I haven't really stuck around long, but upstairs is where it gets hot and heavy. But I mean, honestly, this was my experience back in the day. If you were out in the wild and you start a new character and you're in the starting zones, and you see people, there are certain things about them that kind of belie the fact that they're a role player. Example one, using the role player walk, pressing / on your number pad, to let your character walk instead of run. And if somebody's doing that, it's generally an indicator that they're role playing, because unless you're, elite PvPer and you're being ironic, that walk setting is called the RP walk by a whole lot of people for a good reason. It makes a character more realistic. They're waltzing around, they don't have anywhere to be. And it kind of demonstrates that I'm not Evan playing my character. I am Stinkhorn, the Tauren, Death Knight in my, home city, looking for something to eat, that kind of thing.
That's another thing I should point out, by the way. Don't name your character owns noobs 1398 XXX. You can't readily roleplay with somebody whose name is like Fart Nugget 92.
Oh yeah, that should go without saying too. I mean, it boils down to your name, your class, your appearance, how you choose to behave, and everything. Role playing itself is a really wide kind of. The possibilities are almost endless. However, a lot of possibilities are not commonly entertained. For example, use your best judgment with this kind of thing. You have to be the kind of person that people want to interact with. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be something that's completely derivative. You don't have to be an elf warrior who acts like your favorite fantasy character, necessarily. You don't have to be a human paladin that praises the light and says thy and thou and speaks in Old English or anything like that. You can be interesting, and I think some of the more interesting roleplayers and roleplay characters that they've created have kind of cool hooks that aren't necessarily abrasive. I mean, you don't have a speech impediment. You don't have, an uncontrollable desire to touch people's butts, that kind of thing. But maybe somebody who has a tormented past and doesn't like when anybody approaches them, gets really defensive when people call them an elf when they are actually a human that's been transformed, that kind of thing. There are ways you can get creative without being offensive, without being inappropriate, and without being obnoxious, honestly, because, well, I guess I'll leave it there.
Well, and, the other thing is don't, so you can be mean. Don't think that this is all, cuddly rainbows and butterflies. My Death Knight is not friendly. She does not like the fact that she is alive in her undeath, or whatever you want to call it. And she generally feels like a lot of people look down on her for what she is, and so she's very offensive about a lot of things. And then, my rogue is, well, what you would think a rogue would be. I serve myself, I want money and things, and I don't care who you are. And then, my priest is a very nice person. She likes to talk to people and is, sociable and stuff like that. So all of my characters are very different in their tropes. And another add-on that I'd like to point out, that I enjoy a lot, that is used even less than the other ones, it's called Griffin Heart Items. And what it does, they obviously don't do anything actual in the game, but it allows you to make your own items. And you can make your own bags and put these fake items in said bags, and it has nothing to do with your actual UI. It doesn't take up any bag space whatsoever. And you can also, these items can generate auras and stuff like that. So, if you are a wizard who's carrying a dark orb that you're hiding because it has evil powers, but it causes you to emit a dark aura, you can put that on your character. And instead of just describing it through something like my roleplay or something like that, you can also add a literal buff that people can see as long as they have this add-on, to make it even more immersive, so that there's more information readily available. Because that's one of the biggest barriers in roleplaying, is the information that is available that comes to you through a game compared to what you'd have if they were actually standing in front.
Right.
Yep. One other thing I would like to add, mostly as advice for new role players, is if you're going to start role playing, make sure you start with something small and simple. Don't start with a really complex backstory or a really complex character, and make sure that your character is of a small and humble origin. What I notice a lot of people do is they will try to tie the character into the lore and make him super important in some fashion. Like, if I had $1 for every guy who's tried to roleplay with me who claimed he was related to Arthas, I would be extremely wealthy. Please don't do that. Just start a regular character, just keep it simple and keep it small, and you will make everyone's life a lot easier.
Also, when we're talking about these kind of add-ons that let you put a character description in, it's best if you stick to a physical description and not an entire backstory. There are actually dozens of resources online where you can kind of talk about backstory and talk about your character development and post a huge backstory and actually write about your character itself. And these actually include the WoW official forums as well. But when you are using one of these My Roleplay add-ons and you're looking for roleplay out in the world, you want a description to kind of convey something that your character model can't necessarily convey. Not your deep, dark past, not what you're running from, not who your parents were, but tattoos, scars, markings,
facial expression.
The condition of your clothes. Let your role-playing associates kind of infer things about you from your description and keep it physical. And then if you have a huge, deep, dark past and you are running from something and your parents were significant to your story, have that come out in your interactions itself. And that's generally a good strategy to go off.
One other thing that I'm going to add on to this is that if you're not a lot of the times, like in standard chat, like in text messages and stuff, I will put asterisks around something to be like actions, like asterisk hug, asterisk means I'm hugging you. Obviously, there's emotes in Warcraft already, but they don't really, there's not that many of them, and you can't put, I walk up and poke you in the cheek, or, however detailed you want to be. If you type /me, so like instead of saying /hug, if you type /me, it allows you to actually type in that orange text that is action text. So you can put /me, and then it'll start with your name. So like, my priest name is Kikiana, and if I type /me, it'll say Kikiana, and then I'll be like, walks up to Stinkhorn and scratches his right horn with her thumb. Or something along those lines. That's terrible, but that's an example. That is not something that, there's not an emote for me walking up to feel how, strong his horn is. But I'm able to convey that by typing it.
And then there's going to be
I probably wouldn't touch it if your name is Stinkhorn.
Yeah, seriously. How stinky is your horn? No, but, and you wouldn't see any kind of associated action performed by the character model itself. This is where it kind of crosses over into the realm of imagination, which is what roleplay really is all about.
Again, think Dungeons and Dragons. If you've ever heard of it, played it, or anything like that, this is essentially what you're doing, except instead of having to roll dice, the game casts the spells for you, and instead of having to say where you're walking, you can just walk there yourself.
Not that there aren't people in Warcraft that roleplay with a dice system in order to establish probabilities. It's a huge community, and there are lots of add-ons and lots of guilds that take this to the next level, so to speak. The mythic raiders of roleplay, as it were, to whom this is the primary, gameplay for them. It's not pet battles, it's not PvP. It's this emergent gameplay that they spend their $15 a month engaging in, and that is their end game, basically. And so when you are looking for a role-playing guild, if you find a good fit with a good community, a lot of the times they are developing their own long-term role-play stories. If you're an active member and start to immerse yourself in that community, you can participate in those stories, and you can kind of discover something that's completely emergent, something that Blizzard hasn't built into the game. It's something that players create themselves within the confines of the game, and I think that's some of the most rewarding content there is, because you don't have to wait for the patch update, and you don't have to wait for the next expansion. Everything is new, and it's all user-driven.
And it's great and wonderful, and you'll probably enjoy it more than you realize. Honestly, really, you will probably enjoy it more than you thought you would. Because it can be very zen and relaxing, but you're still getting to enjoy something wonderful about the game. And it also, people complain that Warcraft has lost all of its social ability, I guess. Nobody talks in dungeons anymore. Used to be we had to talk and coordinate to get through these things, and now it's just queue up and, don't say a word, and not even before the end boss. Just run through it, kill it, and move on. If you want to have something social in this game, this is it. This is one of the best ways to be social, even more than finding a quote-unquote social guild, which, by the way, I've never found one that is truly social besides, 3 dudes talking about something that is weird. A role-playing guild that is actually a role-playing guild will be incredibly social.
All right, so just final tips, I guess. Learn the difference between out-of-character and in-character talk. Don't feel like you're limited to only in-character discussions. You can always specify, clarify, ask questions, ask for help, guidance, but mostly to clarify issues, or if you have to communicate something that's happening in real life that will take you away from the computer for a moment. A lot of people use parentheses or brackets to indicate out-of-character text. Perfectly acceptable. Some guilds will frown upon excessive use of out-of-character text in guild chat. Some people like to keep it more pure in character. That's going to vary. And basically, yeah, like Florian said, if you're going to try this for the first time, keep it simple. You don't even have to have a huge backstory. If you're playing an orc, then maybe your backstory is really similar to a lot of the other orcs that are there. I mean, you come from Durotar, you have green skin, you're of a warrior background, and just kind of rather assign your character a set of morals, and then kind of just operate based on what your character thinks is right. And you can go really far with just having a kind of a moral compass that you can follow. And it can be like to your own. It can be completely unlike to your own. I think people like roleplay because they can live in the shoes of somebody who's completely different from themselves. Or they imagine themselves in their character, only with, spell powers and stuff,
Definitely. I don't have any other thoughts. Florian, do you?
I think we've covered just about everything.
Wonderful. I hope you guys try role-playing, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's go into the mailbag. Welcome to the mailbag, everybody. You can send your emails to thecastbar@gmail.com. Send us a tweet on Twitter, which is @CastbarPodcast. You can call and leave us a voicemail at 508-738-2278. You can also leave us a comment on any of our YouTube videos. Any of those are easy ways to get to us. I mean, if it's something quick and small, we can just answer it right then and there, whether it's on Twitter or anything like that. We also post each episode on Reddit. So if you're listening to this, you might have found it from Reddit, or you can also ask questions on our Reddit. Well, we don't have one on the post that this episode will be posted in. So you got a lot of options there. We didn't have any mail this week. So instead I decided I'm going to ask you a question. And you can answer on any of the forums that I just previously stated. After this is on YouTube, you can leave it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And the question is, what is one feature you would change in Warcraft and why? Now, if this is just you want one taken out, like if you want, Dungeon Finder or LFR removed, that's perfectly fine. But I'd like to know why. Some people want, battle pits to have something else in them, or change to the loot system, or there's a lot of different things out there. What is something that you would like to see changed and why? And do either of you have an immediate answer to this, or should we answer next week?
Well, my immediate answer would be crafting.
Okay.
Simply because crafting has been the same boring, repetitive nonsense since the vanilla. And it's gotten shaken up a little bit in Warlords of Draenor, but it's still the same thing. You gather some material, and you click on some things in a menu. It's never been interesting. It's never been interactive. And I think that, more than anything else, needs an overhaul.
All right. And Evan, do you have an immediate answer, or would you like to reserve yours for next week?
No, I'd actually add more class-specific quests for in-game.
You mean the stuff that they've taken out?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think that was a good feature. Like we were talking about the Benediction and Rockdalar, and I think the Warlock Fire Quest is a really good addition. It was cosmetic. I think for my Death Knight right now, maybe this is just because I'm really hurting for an upgrade to my weapon. I want a weapon quest. I want to get a rune blade, and I want a quest I want it to be 20 quests long and take a long time. Not because I'm grinding the same raid every week to gather 125 aggregator stones, but I want it to take a long time because I have to, do complicated scenarios and travel all over the world and associate with my other players and all that kind of thing.
All right. Well, one thing that this isn't a feature, I would like to see more classes and class combos and more races. As for a feature that I would change, both of yours are really great options. Like, professions as a whole need an upgrade. And the class quests, like, the problem with them is that you would only do them once. So they were very limited content is the issue with those. And I think that's why they've deviated away from them. Like, the Green Fire quest, a lot of people loved it, but only Warlocks got to do it, and they only got to do it once. So it didn't, not only did it not have replay value, but you couldn't do it over again. I'm going to save my answer for next week, because I don't have anything immediately popping into mind. So I'll save mine for next week. But yeah, so send in your answers. I'd love to hear it. Anything and everything. And, if there's something crazy wild out there, I will most likely throw it onto the show notes, and we'll talk about it on the show. So yeah, send in your answers. Love to hear from you. Welcome to the review, everybody. Review it every week. We'll review something, whether it's a class or a 5-man dungeon, a raid, a quest line, a battleground, something. And this week we are going with Sunken Temple, which is a vanilla raid. It is currently available to characters that are level, I believe, 50 to 55 is about the time frame when you're able to get in there through the dungeon finder. You can walk into the door yourself at level 45. And it was around since the very beginning, or like super early in vanilla, and it got revamped in Cataclysm, and it stuck around in about the same form since then. The review section is broken into 3 different parts: ambience, gameplay, and lore. Ambience is everything you see, hear, basically everything on your senses. Gameplay is obviously trash, numbers, bosses, loot, mechanics. And lore is, well, does this dungeon or whatever it is have any story, and is it any good? And so ambience, we'll go straight into that with Evan.
See, ambience is pretty cool, I think. If you haven't been to this dungeon, it's located in the Swamp of Sorrows. Am I right? Or is that Swamp of Sorrows. I always get that confused with Dustdweller Marsh, which is a very kind of verdant, wet, boggy swamp, basically, with a lot of presence from, these days, Murlocs, Broken, Draenei, and right now there's an Alliance Horde conflict going over there since the Cataclysm changes, which really shook up the zone itself a whole lot. But the Sunken Temple, of course, is in the middle of a big lake in the central eastern part of the zone. The first thing that strikes me about this dungeon is the fact that it's pretty expansive. Underneath the water, the entrance, going from the entrance to the top of the temple, I guess, to the instance portal, if you walk there by foot. Right now it's kind of a miniature questing zone, and getting to the instance portal is pretty complicated. It's almost a labyrinth to get down there, which in the past made corpse running pretty unpleasant. But the architecture itself, I think, makes it kind of mysterious and foreboding. I think it's kind of a captivating environment to have a dungeon at. It's something that kind of reminds me of is Wailing Caverns in the Barrens, where the entrance, the cave entrance to get down to the instance portal, is kind of a labyrinth. It's full of monsters, and it's kind of dangerous to get down there. You can kind of, interpret that the dangerous kind of entrance going to the portal itself really gets you ready and amped up for the dangers that lie in the darkest kind of corners of the temple itself. And I think that sets a pretty cool mood, to be honest. Now, inside the dungeon, it's very kind of, again, wet and boggy and swampy. It's got all of this moss growing on the stones. It's really aged and weathered. There are lots of broken pieces of the architecture, and of course it's been inhabited by these kind of trolls and mostly the green dragon flight, which are aggressive towards you. I think that in the past, the dungeon had an upper level and a lower level, and a bunch of optional bosses, and it gave a lot more of a feel that this is a huge troll operation, and there was a lot of kind of troll shadow priests and voodoo priests that were working in conjunction to cast some huge spell of resurrection for their blood god. But nowadays, after the Cataclysm simplification, or should we say the dungeon crunch, it has been kind of it's kind of simplified. Definitely, it's kind of the dungeon squish rather. A to B is really easy. Again, like the Wailing Caverns, a lot of the side passages and places where you can get confused and lost were omitted entirely. But we've also lost this kind of feel that there's a big kind of ritual going on where you're going around killing the individual priests and things to stop the spell from being cast, and then going and taking out the head honchos, that kind of thing. But I think it still tries to allude to this kind of, we're casting a spell, you better try to stop us type of thing. And then you got to kill a couple of big bad bosses, and then of course you get your shiny blues.
And I would like to point out that, like Devin said, the dungeon before Cataclysm was significantly larger than what you're going to walk into now. It got a pretty much a complete overhaul design-wise. The rooms and everything have been changed a lot. You walk in, now you just get brought into the main large expanse of the dungeon, where it used to be there was almost this like labyrinth maze circular patterns on upper and bottom floors that you actually had to go through, as he said, to actually kill the priests that were conducting the ritual. You don't do that anymore. And I don't believe you can actually even access those floors anymore. I believe the dungeon just takes you straight into that main little area, which it used to be that this dungeon was like a boogeyman because of how complicated the floors were. It was almost like a maze, and so it was very difficult for a lot of groups. So it's much easier now, but you lose a lot of what used to make this dungeon what it was, and that hurts it a lot. It will not affect my grade, I will say, because it is what it is now. But if they could have had the same system that they have now and kept it in its original state, just maybe gave it a little more direction, it would have been such a fantastic dungeon. But with the way that everything was laid out and the way that original WoW played, it was such a difficult dungeon to get through.
Right, but then we have to also remember that back then you didn't just appear in that dungeon because you hit your dungeon finder and you're in the appropriate level range and you got teleported there. People went there deliberately, and if it was too complicated, not worth the effort of assembling a pug to go out there, then you just simply didn't do it.
Right. Florian, did you get to do this before it got changed?
I did a very long time ago. My main memory of it is being extremely lost and running around trying to figure out where I am and what I'm doing.
Okay.
So, in that regard, the new version of Sunken Temple is much better. There's no possible way you can get lost in this thing. Which is a good thing, but as you said before, I feel like it kind of loses a little bit of its character. I feel it's almost too simple now, because it's basically just one big room with a couple... I can't even call them hallways with a straight face, because they're so tiny. They're like little stubs of hallways sticking out from it. So it almost feels like this place is too small and not complicated enough, and it just feels like kind of a letdown because of that. It's just essentially a big room with several bosses in it.
Yeah, now it's incredibly... It's almost over-simple. Oh, it's almost been overly simplified because so much has been taken away from it. It does have a very unique feel to it, though. I mean, the music is pretty calm, and it definitely gives you this feeling that, well, you are literally underwater and underground in this dungeon. And it definitely lends itself to that, almost kind of like you're crawling through a sewer. And everything is like this dark green stone, and there's moss all over the place because there's too much moisture in the air. And it's like, it both now and before, it was incredibly a creepy dungeon.
Yeah, I think the tone of the dungeon is actually really cool because it's so different from all the other dungeons in that level range. I mean, before Sunken Temple, you have kind of Uldaman, which is, again, an underground temple that's been abandoned and reoccupied. But it's completely different in feel, being the Uldaman is very dry, and this is very wet. And then afterwards, you have Blackrock, which is, like, an underground city.
Brimstone.
And it's a lot of the same architecture, honestly. If you took out all the moss and the green and replaced it with red fire and dwarves as opposed to dragons, then it would be almost very similar. There are, of course, all these snake statues and things like that, but as far as the dark stone underground type of thing, the color palette and the way they've dressed up the environment with the decorating, I call it decorating like some of you have the internal decorator, one of the blood elves over there going and saying, let's put some hanging moss here. But it's really a testament to the art team that they've been able to take something that's almost the same concept as places like Uldaman and Blackrock Depths and made it so different as far as feel goes just by affecting the environment itself.
Definitely. So, Evan, then, do you have a grade for ambience?
Yeah, for the ambience, I think it does a great job of setting the scene. And I'm willing to give it an A.
Florian?
I'd also give it an A. It looks really good. It does a good job of feeling underwater with all the hanging moss and the green stone and all that. And like I said, my only problem with it is the fact that it feels too small to be a proper dungeon, basically. So I'd say an A.
I'm going to tell you, as a whole, when I am leveling up, I despise getting to this dungeon. And you'll soon find out why in our next segment. But for the ambience of this dungeon, I really miss what it was. And even today, though it is still great in its deliverance, and in the feeling that it gives you with what is truly happening here, you don't have as much information as you used to, but you still have enough to realize that it's bad. And when a dungeon gives you a bad feeling through a video game, that's good. So I'm going to give it an A as well. So now we'll move on to gameplay. And God help this dungeon on gameplay. Florian, would you like to take us into gameplay?
I will. The gameplay. Oh, man. I'm just going to be totally honest. This place is really, really boring, gameplay-wise. The trash does nothing interesting. It just sort of exists. The bosses don't have any interesting mechanics. There's some stuns, some damage over time stuff. Nothing really interesting or exciting. There's
troll
nothing.
Mind controls, and the dragon will disorient you for like half a century. I think it's like 12 seconds, but it feels like half a century.
Oh, the sleep, yeah.
That's true, but I don't think that's enough. Like, just those two mechanics aren't going to save this dungeon
Okay.
or even come close. The only thing I can say positive about the gameplay is that I like the way they try to do like a wing-style layout, where you have a big central area and then you have different wings so you can choose which order you want the bosses in. It was an unnecessary design choice because there are so few bosses and the wings are so small. But, yeah, they did that, so I'll give them bonus points for that. Aside from that, it is a very boring and uninteresting dungeon gameplay-wise.
Well, there's only 3 bosses, and, like, it's one of those things of, like, it's actually an illusion on that you have options. So the troll you have to kill, because until you kill him, the green dragons don't spawn, and you can't attack the shade at the actual final boss until you've killed the green dragons. So you can skip the avatar of Hakar, and that's it. But I
didn't even know that.
I guess you're still skipping a third of the dungeon, I guess. But no, he's right. The gameplay in this is completely atrocious, and it's the reason that I despise it when I'm leveling up, especially because I like to use character boosts, and it's right before you hit level 60. And this is like one of like 4 dungeons you get, maybe 3. I know it's not many, that you get between the levels of like 50 and 55. You're doing like Stratholme Servant Quarter, this, and I forget what the other one is, like, on end until you hit, like, 57 when you finally get Blackrock Foundry. And until then, not Blackrock Foundry, Blackrock Spire.
Oh, yeah, there you go, never mind. Wrong expansion.
Yeah, too many Blackrock things at this point. The gameplay in it's atrocious. The bosses, like Foreman said, the bosses are troll, trash is dull, dungeon's dull. There's actually not that much experience here, so for leveling purposes, it's not even good that you get it a lot. Sure, it's quick. It's probably better now, actually, with the dungeon change, where you get the bonus experience for completing the dungeon. Like, it might be more effective now, but previously it was horrendous. And, oh god, it's just so bad. Evan, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think this place was completely fine for the era. And what I mean by that is that I don't think it was actually all that boring doing it at level when it was irrelevant content, because what you had was the main trash packs in the middle room that we know now. They did have a little bit of complication, and that was that they were really easy to pull additional groups and everything. It was pretty tight as far as their arrangement. So, am I mistaken in thinking that they even had a knockback or no?
The dragons do. Not the green dragons, the dragonkin, the four-legged weird...
The worm lords or whatever. Right.
Whatever those are actually classified as.
So the girl dragons are putting people to sleep, long sleep timer. You gotta have a healer right on top of that to keep people in the game, or if the healer itself, God forbid, gets sleeped, that's a bad problem. If you're at a challenging gear level for the instance, you have people knocking you back into other groups more often than not, with the general luck of different players. You have packs of little whelplings, which challenges the tank's ability to grab AoE aggro. And in a big group where you have to focus on big mobs as well, that can be pretty intense. And for Vanilla WoW, that is pretty much like a challenging dungeon, I mean, with all things considered. And then we go into the boss mechanics, where Jamal the Prophet, of course, does his mind control, which I think is really sweet. Like I said, with our guest, one of my favorite mechanics is when you get to share the love with your other group members and go on a killing rampage. Definitely satisfactory when you're able to do that. He also, I can't remember his other mechanics, but I know that the trolls in that room, some of them will turn into an untargetable ghost that does a heavy amount of damage that you need to kite around. And that's an interesting trash mechanic that definitely puts a confounding factor into the whole thing. People can get really arrogant and pull the entire trash room by itself, as a lot of people are doing these days in the Dungeon Finder. Gather all the trash up and just AoE it down. All of a sudden, you have 4 of these ghosts that are doing 400 times the damage per melee swing of their living counterparts. People don't understand what's happening. They don't know that they need to run away, and then all of a sudden you have a dead tank, and all hell breaks loose. I think anything that can kind of pause this kind of crazy steamroll from levels 1 to 60 is pretty good. The shade of Hakar, I think the fact that you're summoning him from a pile of skulls manually is something you don't see in very many other dungeons, just as a kind of a gameplay nugget. And then unlocking the last boss, even though you can go up to him at the very beginning of the instance and look at him, you can't attack him until his guardians have been defeated. And then the boss himself dies way too fast, of course, these days, to have him even reveal any of his mechanics, I think. But the fact that you kind of have to go through this unlocking thing and complete the dungeon kind of in stages, even though you have access to everything kind of at once off the bat, give it a little bit of a redeeming quality. It's not quite such the tank and spank steamroll that maybe I feel like you guys are trying to make it out to be.
Okay. I like, the last time I remember leveling in this, like, very clearly, I was a prot paladin, and I could literally probably do the whole dungeon soloing it without even blinking. Just yeah, it was just so so spammy and just so easy. I do appreciate definitely these days. Back then, completely different story. Gameplay between today and when I did this dungeon the first time, and it was what it was. I mean, completely different sides of the spectrum. I do enjoy those ghosts, and I have seen plenty of people die to them, and I enjoy that. Mostly just because they're not prepared for it. Like, it's not that they probably couldn't deal with it, I just think that they're not prepared for it.
Exactly.
So, Florian, gameplay grade. Be honest.
Now, after listening to Evan, I feel I'm gonna have to revise my gameplay grade. I was originally gonna go with a D-. Now I'll go with maybe a C-.
Alright.
Because, I did forget about the ghosts at the end. Those were kind of an interesting mechanic that I don't think we've seen much anywhere else. And but other than that, I really don't feel it's redeemable, especially by today's standards in terms of today's player power.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely.
And Evan, gameplay grade?
I'm going to give it a B-, just because it doesn't hold up these days, especially after the revisions. It was great at the time. Among the vanilla dungeons, if you asked me back in 2006, I might give it a different grade. But these days, it's hard to maintain the polish. I definitely don't think it's an A's worth of gameplay because a lot of things that you Florian said are valid. But with its redeeming qualities, a B- I think is fine. And also, we've seen those ghosts again in, I believe, Seth Calls.
I don't know.
Upstairs before you get to the place where you can fight the Raven Lord mount dropping optional boss in heroic mode.
Yeah, I think you're right. Probably. Yeah. I would, on a small little side tangent, I would really like to see these ghosts never go away, and you have to no, wait. This would make it much more interesting if the ghosts never went away, and you had to bring them over to an urn, and then the urn drags them inside, because these ghosts, you can just run away from them.
Right.
If they never went away, it would make this much more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see very many mechanics where you can't kill me until you do this kind of thing. And that'd be cool if you could destroy their soul vessel or something like that, or you kill them and the ghost pops out and the healer has to heal the ghost to full in order for the ghost to go away, or that kind of thing. Kind of like you don't see battles where you have to heal any mob outside of raids, that kind of thing.
Those are very, very rare. Like the Velithria in Icecrown.
Yeah, but it was also in Temple of the Jade Serpent. No. The raid instance in Pandaria where you go Terrace in the Spring. The second boss there, you have to do healing phases for him. Yeah. And then also we saw that in Blackwing Lair. It was the first time we ever saw that. So 3 times. The second boss there in Blackwing Lair.
When do you heal it?
Am I mistaken? Oh, I thought you did heal this boss.
The red dragon? No, it just gets mind controlled by Wrathion, and then you have to kill it before it kills you.
Oh, it starts off at 25% chance, or 25% health, and it gives everybody a 200% haste buff. Yeah, okay, never mind. I, for some reason, thought that you had to heal it up from 25%, but indeed, you are trying to kill it.
Okay. My gameplay grade is going to be a D because I find the gameplay in this dungeon to be completely atrocious. The only saving thing for me is the troll, and that's because mind control and root, and not only is it a route, it's a really long route, and he walks away from you after he does it.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, you're going to stay there, and I'm going to go over here, and you're mind controlled, so now I only have to deal with these 3, but really, I'm only dealing with these 2, because I left the tank un-CC'd, but he has to deal with my ogre brute.
Yeah.
So all I have to do is focus on the mage and the healer who are running around squealing. Okay, I like this.
You tune the numbers a little bit, and this fight isn't trivial,
No, but unfortunately numbers just make this fight completely hilarious. So yeah, so it's a D for me. I can't quite give it an F. If that boss didn't have like that one thing that made him entertaining, it would be a complete horrible grade for me. I'll go ahead and take the first steps into lore. Like many dungeons, depending on how you got to them, lore might be a little bit hard to come across, and the backstory for this is even harder to come across. Because I believe the original quests that explained what this dungeon is are no longer in the game. I believe they were removed in the Cataclysm revamp. So basically what this dungeon is, it's a troll dungeon, and it was from the Atalai trolls who were allied with the Gurubashi who served the god Hakar, which is the ones that the Hakar is essentially a horribly evil troll god who just wants blood and power. And they had taken some of his relics and stuff here, and after they got completely stomped upon by elves and what have you. And the dragon aspect Ysera thought that this was going to be the place where Hakar was going to be brought back into the world. So her and a green dragonflight stuck it underneath the swamp, just said no, 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 and squished it down into the ground, which is why it's called the Sunken Temple. They were wrong. She left her consort there to guard the temple. He fell prey to the dark powers, and that's why there's the green dragons there, who are also evil because they're being controlled by the evil powers. And unfortunately, instead of trying to figure out a way to solve the evil powers, we just kill things. Always seems to be a much easier solution to our problems. Why save them when we could just kill them? And unfortunately, a lot of the rest of the lore also got removed in the Cataclysm revamp because it used to be that you couldn't really do anything with the bosses that we currently do things with. Like for the Avatar of Hakar, you actually needed a special item to actually summon him. Most people didn't do him because you had to have the item. To get to the troll that we were talking about, you had to kill 6 priests that were channeling a spell on a higher floor. I think you actually were able to go to Shade of Aranicus, but he was the highest level boss. He was level 55, and so he was hard. And you also had to get through his dragons first. And then the other thing that's actually very lore important is there was an idol that was below the dungeon.
Right.
And it was very hard to get to because it was like a Zelda puzzle, and that you had to hit things in the right order to unlock the door. And below everything is an altar, and down there was an idol, and there was an entire quest associated with getting this idol, and that gave you a lot more information, which is no longer available. So currently, the lore is that this was a temple to the god Hakar. Green dragon sunken into the ground. Green dragons got corrupted, and we need to go in and stop it now. Is essentially all that's happening now. It kind of makes me sad that we lose so much because they simplified the dungeon in this way.
Yeah. It definitely seems kind of neutered and loses all of its potency, I feel.
Well, and especially because they took the quests out for it. That hurts it so much in the story aspect. Because, I think the thing about this is that with the changes to Cataclysm, if Blizzard had all of its own magic money in the world and time and resources and had 1 million people, whatever, to work on WoW, I don't think this dungeon would exist anymore. I think when the Cataclysm happened, this dungeon would have disappeared. But they need to I don't want to say they rehash it, but they need to retain as much of their content as possible, especially in lower levels, because they don't want to work on that as much, because they need to focus on what most people are playing, which is the end game. So I think that's why this dungeon stuck around, but because of how much of a barrier it had with its design and people thinking that it was a maze and stuff, I think that really they just kept it as another dungeon you can do at level 50.
Right. I think they kept it in because it breaks the tedium up of leveling up 1 through 60. I don't think the changes they made were the best. At least with the Wailing Caverns, when they made the changes and neutered the kind of maze aspect of the dungeon, it maintained the flow more or less.
They also evolved and changed a lot of the monsters in Wailing Caverns too.
What do you mean?
No, not Wailing Caverns. Razorfen Crawl. That's the one that got changed.
Oh yeah, that was a huge overhaul, and that was with the 6.02 patch.
Right.
Which I think was...
Don't mind me.
And then they didn't actually change any of the topography itself, and the same with the Black Fathom Deeps. They didn't change the map itself, only the mobs that were inside of it.
Right,
which
whereas this one we
is a
lost
different approach.
ton of the map.
Which, yeah, I can understand. They want to make it a little bit more accessible, and they certainly succeed in the Wailing Caverns without taking out, 5 bosses and a huge amount of lore. So, it's tough for me to swallow that.
I think they could, so the problem with the original dungeon is that, it had floors that connected in weird places to other floors. And that's what, made it feel like you're walking around a labyrinth. It's like second floor connects to fifth floor, which has a stairwell in it that connects to the third floor, which is where the entrance is, which also has a stairway down to the bottom floor. And that's where a lot of people would be like, well, I don't know where I am. I think if they would have just taken, because, there was 2 stairways that went to the second floor and 2 stairways that went to the fifth floor, and both of those could connect to one another. I think if they would have just made a change to where it was, a linear path, you'd walk into the second floor, and it would take you through the second floor into the fifth floor, and then the fifth floor would lead you back down into, the second floor or something. I realize normally we criticize things being linear, but it at least would have kept the content.
I suppose. I kind of like non-linear dungeon arrangements in general, because once you learn the dungeon itself, you can make more intelligent choices about what's, like Blackrock Depths, you can make choices about how much of this dungeon do I want to do today, or if you're assembling your group, how much of the dungeon are we going to do, or what bosses am I after, and you can choose your approach that way. Like I said, with the Sunken Temple, you might make a specific group back in the day just to go get that idol in the bottom, and the group's going to have different expectations. And it's going to take a lot less time just to go straight for that aspect of the dungeon than to, in the scenario you're explaining, go through the first level and the second level and third level in order to get to that specific part. I realize, though, that you're talking about a change that would be made in the present, whereas I'm talking about the quests that were available in the very distant past now.
Well, yeah, but stick them inside the door like they do with all the other dungeon quests. Right, it at least would still make this information, like I had to pull this off of different places that I was reading from. There is nothing in the game anymore that gives you this information.
Right.
Which is depressing. I mean, because people complain about inconsistencies in Warcraft. We complain about inconsistencies in Warcraft's story. And they retcon it constantly to try and make it more accurate, but they also keep cutting off their own foot.
Well, that is the case, and we've been seeing this over and over again with their old war content just not being kind of prioritized over their new stuff. As far as generating new lore and new stories and developing interesting characters, I think they're doing a really good job with their current content. It just isn't translating very well to the old stuff.
No, the new stuff is fantastic. I'm not dogging that at all. Absolutely. I just wish they would hold on to their older stuff with a little bit more tenacity.
I'd agree with that. One of my biggest problems with this dungeon is the fact that I don't have access to a lot of the lore in terms of quests and the like. And I had to Google up a bunch of stuff, and I couldn't necessarily find everything. For example, one thing I still don't know is exactly who or what a Hakar is, or what the payoff is once they summon it. Like, what exactly does this do for them?
He's kind of like a mini Deathwing, really. He just wanted everything to die. Like, even the trolls that served him, I realize that this doesn't help because, you still couldn't find it. But just so you know, he was like a mini Deathwing. He was going to kill everybody, including the people who served him, who, why would you serve someone who you know is going to kill you and literally devour your soul? I don't know. And he was just an old... He's not an old god, but he is an ancient god.
He's a god who is old.
Thank you.
To an old god.
Yeah. As far as the Azerothian pantheon kind of thing, deities and deity-like individuals that are out there in the universe and everything, yeah, Hakar is one of these aspects. But I'm not entirely sure of his place in the whole thing. There are a lot of really good experts, that are making YouTube videos and who run websites and blogs that help kind of make sense of the Warcraft lore. If you are drawn to finding more of that information yourself, Hakar is a kind of significant player. And if you're immersed in the lore of the old world in general, then you're going to see a lot of Fakar, especially if you're questing around zones that involve trolls a whole lot. I think he's also popping up a little bit in the hinterlands, if I'm not mistaken.
I couldn't tell you for sure anymore.
And I think,
if I remember correctly, he is essentially an evil Loa, which Loa are the troll gods who are ridiculously old and ancient, and that's where they, like, troll priests don't get their power from the light, essentially. They get their power from Loa, which is their gods. And he is a Loa, an extremely powerful one, and an extremely evil one. And it is believed that trolls could even have possibly existed before the Titans created everything else. Obviously, there's nothing confirming that because Blizzard. But that is a very strong consensus, is that, like, everything we are, and like, trolls were here before anything else was. And there's even, like, I've seen weird little, like, evolutionary trees that show that we came from trolls, possibly, and all kinds of different stuff. I mean, because, like, in Uldaman and stuff like that, they show what the Titans made, and that was not man. Like, they made dwarves, sure, but that, as well, originally it was the earthen, but it wasn't. There's nothing in there about the trolls, because trolls are old.
Yeah, what do you mean by we? We came from trolls. What are you trying to say?
Well, humans.
Well, then again, I guess all the humanoid races that are native to Azeroth, including Tauren and Night Elves especially, come from trolls. They have the same ears and everything. I buy that a whole lot more, you know. But, I mean, honestly, when we think about it, WoW isn't a very... I don't know. I want to say they're more concerned with in-game rating, that kind of thing, and they like being more focused on the gameplay and the rating experience and community, and less so on lore. And when you compare it to a game like, I don't know if any of you guys tried Warhammer itself.
I own an entire army of Warhammer, have played Dawn of War 2, and am very involved in the lore.
What about the MMO? Did you ever try that?
I didn't play it a whole lot. Like, I tried it, but I didn't. I was significantly younger than I am now, and so I didn't really get to do a whole lot with it.
But then you have the games like that, which had a really extensive lore system, in that it's like going around Pandaria and finding little scrolls, kind of contribute to an achievement, that kind of thing. In Warhammer, you could find these little scrolls that gave you pages in a kind of lore textbook that you could look up at lots of different kind of topics and things like that. And then you have games like Lord of the Rings Online, which of course has Tolkien's entire history behind it and all of his writings, kind of establishing the lore for that. And the lore, of course, is really important to them. And then you have Blizzard tours going through their kind of classic game, which is where all the lore kind of came from, outside of the Warcraft 1, 2, and 3 franchise itself. You're trying to develop all of this kind of deeper detail in Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms. And then with the Cataclysm, it really kind of was a cataclysm of their lore. A lot of it was just lost. The other parts of it have been completely muddled. Granted, there were aspects of the lore that weren't really well thought out. I mean, if we look back at the Black Fathom Deeps, there wasn't a whole lot going on there before the revamp, and I think that was one of our first episodes talking about that. Was that not?
I am not sure. I could go look at notes. I think that might have actually been one of our test episodes that isn't available. Right. Yeah. But
then they don't really focus on maintaining or preserving this lore and keeping it relevant and letting people who are interested in the lore really dig into it. Instead, they've created a whole lot of new kind of storylines and story arcs in the different zones. I mean, you have Malfurion in the Dark Shore, that kind of thing.
Oh, we just lost viewers. Malfurion.
Sorry. But he's doing his thing, and a lot of the lore out in the old world, or in the world now, kind of relates to Cataclysm, events and things like that. And I would have liked to have seen more of the lore preserved, especially in relation to these kind of trolls and everything. The trolls didn't have very much to do with the Cataclysm whatsoever, and none of their zones really changed all that much at all. For example, I don't know, the Hinterlands had a single pixel move, to be honest.
Well, I think one of the issues in this, like, because, like, when we went into Warlords, they're like, this timey-wimey thing, that's how we're getting there, and we're not explaining it because we don't want to. Essentially, they're just like, this is just how we're getting you there so you can enjoy the expansion, okay? And the lore inside the expansion itself is fantastic. Like, they have done such a good job with the lore that exists inside Warlords. It is really, really, really strong, really good, and I think that the original lore is just so large, and even before World of Warcraft, it convoluted itself a little bit. So I think it's just that maintaining a true consistency for the original lore is it's just too difficult anymore, because there are so many things involved and so many different things that happen at different times that kind of happen at the same time as other things. So, with Draenor having its own lore, really, like technically, with the way that everything has been changed and everything for this new dimension, it's so much easier for them to maintain a strong, consistent story than what they have to try and maintain on true Azeroth.
Right, so, like you're saying, they're not even going to try, or it's not worth it to try to go back and kind of set things straight in the old world?
I think there's so many frayed ends that it's easier to cut them off than tie them to something. Like, I'm just going to cut the rope instead of trying to fix the frayed end of the rope.
Yeah, to clean it up.
So, I mean, that really sucks, but it is a quicker and easier answer. I mean, especially because Blizzard only has so much, like, it's not a question of money, it's a matter of time. And that's a lot of time that because, there's maybe a dozen people that are focused completely on the lore side of Warcraft. I don't know for sure. But, they have, they're working on the lore for the next patch of Warlords of Draenor. They're working on the lore for the next expansion, for how this dungeon that is going to work. Those are priorities, because those are things that are coming up rather than fixing the past. They're focusing on the future.
Well, that makes sense. And then maybe in the distant future, we'll have another Cataclysm-style expansion where the old world is completely kind of wiped, and they set a lot of these things kind of straight. Ooh, maybe like a back-in-time expansion. Like maybe after Draenor, we return to Azeroth, but our Azeroth was lost, and we have to return to the Azeroth of this timeline.
Please don't give them any ideas.
I love that idea. That was my idea when they asked what kind of raid we wanted to see. Or, no, that was me playing into Evan's raid that he created of spaceship.
Yeah.
Landing on a different Azeroth and everything being different. And it sounded awesome to me. But anyway, now that we are really good at getting onto a tangent when it comes to lore, because there's a whole bunch of things tied to it. My lore grade is a B-, and if it would have still been in its original form where everything would be available, I would have probably given it an A+, maybe an A, just because of the problem of really explaining who Kakar is, but original lore would have been an A. Unfortunately, now it's been kind of butchered, and so the lore is significantly weaker, so it renders a B- from me. Evan, lore grade.
I'm going to go C. I don't think it's really bringing very much to the table anymore. Originally, I'm not entirely sure if this, like Sarah thought this, and so she sunk the temple. Turns out she was wrong. Hakar appeared someone else. I think I'll just stick with a C.
Florian, lore grade.
I'd also give it a C, simply because it's hard to find any of the information in-game easily presented, or even out of game. And there's just too many things that don't make sense. There's no real good payoff for them summoning Hakar. There's no explanation of why Ysera didn't, check on her consort at some point. So, I'm just going to leave it at a C. I would give it lower, but I'm going to be merciful today.
All right, that wraps up the review. I hope we didn't destroy it completely for you. You're going to level through it. You've probably already leveled through it. You probably have your own opinion on it. It is what it is. It gets a C+ on average for us, which we haven't had a dungeon yet where we were like, this entire dungeon is crap, scrap it. But generally, grades of like C's are generally pretty bad for what we well, because the way it works, I mean, if it wasn't for the ambience, this would have a even lower grade. But the ambience kind of saved its grade. It's a dungeon, and unfortunately, I truly think it was better before it got changed, just because it had so much more meat to it, even if it was confusing. And I think, like, with the way that dungeons work now, it would have been perfectly fine if it would have stayed the way it was. Like, you don't have to go to the Swamp of Sorrows, you just queue into it, you stick the quest at the beginning, and there you go. Like, that's, and especially now where when you die, you just respawn, like, you don't even have to do a corpse run, you just pop up at the beginning of the dungeon. I think those quality of life changes would have made even this confusing dungeon be so much easier. And especially because the amount of resources you have available today compared to what you had back then are also extremely different. Like, I think this dungeon would have done just fine in its original state, and now it's just been butchered down to simplicity. There you go, Blizzard, gotta dumb things down. God.
Seriously.
That does bring us to the end of the show, everybody. One thing I want to point out is that I almost screamed during the show because, as I've said a couple times, so that I don't sit here and like fiddle with things while I'm talking. Like, I don't know if I have like restless hands or something. I always try and occupy myself in some way to keep my hands busy. And what that has been is fishing. And so my fishing is maxed, and I have a level 3 fishing thing now, and I've caught way too many fish than I ever thought I ever would, because I hate fishing in Warcraft, but it is something for me to be interacting with while I'm talking, because trying to just sit here and be perfectly still is actually incredibly difficult for me, because I'm a 12-year-old with ADD. That's not true. At least I've never been diagnosed, and I'm older than 12. So, in your garrison, if you have a level 3 fishing menagerie, and after you've completed the quest that's gotten you, what's his name, Nat Pagel, you can catch these things called lunarfish carp, which you can throw into the water of your garrison, which summons a murloc, which drops a bunch of random stuff. Mm-hmm. And on that murloc's loot table, at like a 0.05 or 0.5% chance, is the riding turtle from the card game, and the sea turtle, which you can fish out of, a whole bunch of fishing spots at like a 0.01% chance. I threw Lunarfall Carp in a few weeks ago, right after I'd gotten it. Very second one gave me the sea turtle. I'm fishing today during the show, caught a carp, and threw it into the thing, and got the riding turtle.
Oh, congratulations.
I got turtles! I don't know what I'll do with them. They ride at 10% speed. I guess they're water mounts. I mean, you move at a pretty significant pace in the water with them, so there's that. And you can use them at level 1. Who needs someone to drive me around a motorcycle? I got turtles. Anyway, so you can email us at thecastbar@gmail.com. Again, send us a tweet at CastbarPodcast. Call us and leave us a voicemail at 508-738-2278. You can also find us on YouTube. Search the Castbar. Unfortunately, until you hit a certain number of subscribers and views and a whole bunch of other random stuff, you're not able to get a personalized name on YouTube, a personalized URL. So we'll get there eventually. You can find all of our old shows on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube. If there's somewhere else that you would like, if there is something else that needs to catch, like an actual catcher, because that's what like iTunes and Stitcher are. You have to apply to be on them, but they're essentially just catchers for the RSS feed that comes from the host. If it needs to be put somewhere else, just let me know, and I will see what I can do about getting it onto that catcher so that it's available for you in the form that you would like to listen to it through. The music for our bumpers is done by Kevin MacLeod. You can find all of his work at incomtech.com. For each of us, you can send us an email, just at the regular Castbar email, and just draw it to our attention if you just want to send us an email for some reason. Otherwise, I have my own personal Twitter, which is at SchwanMichael. My last name is spelled SCHWAHN. Evan, where can people find you?
Through the Castbar Gmail account or on Twitter at EDCWow.
And Florian?
The easiest way is to email the Castbar, as usual. If you want to, you can also contact me on Twitter at Phalanx, Phalangx. because I don't know how to spell properly.
That's perfectly fine. You don't need to spell. It's overrated. You just talk. I mean, you don't have to, we're not in a role-playing server right now. You can't tell if I'm actually using the full word, or when I say you, it's just a letter instead of actually, the full spelled out version. All right, guys, have a wonderful week. We will see you next week. And actually, I'm going to check real quick before we go, because I wonder if Blackhand has died yet. Nope, he has not died yet. Okay. Hey, you never know. That stuff happens.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, probably tomorrow. If it doesn't happen tomorrow, it'll probably immediately happen a couple days later, because Tuesday hits, reset, they get to re-kill 8 or 9 bosses, gives them another huge hunk of gear, which gives them a lot of power upgrades, which will probably allow them to kill Blackhand. So,
oh yeah.
I mean, it's not surprising. It would be, it is. It's kind of sad now that it's a testament if they survive more than one raid lockout. Anyway, we're at the end of the show. No one's probably listening to this. I'm turning it off now.
See ya, dude.
Out of time.